Hey everyone, welcome back. I wanted to get this video out sooner, but RNG is a cruel mistress and I've had insanely, ridiculously bad luck on getting the Void Plumes yesterday. So much so that I never got to working on this video on stream and ended up sleeping in. But here we are, the Gyre Build guide I promised yesterday. What are my initial impressions of Gyre? Very fun to play, but not always effective. This kind of reminds me of Ureli, but remember I said initial impressions because there are some pretty interesting things you can do with her. So how about we take that deep dive we always do with new frames. As a disclaimer, some of the things I will be discussing today require some existing bugs to be patched. I'm confident they will be patched because said bugs are stuff like equipment not working at all in any capacity when they should, and equipment being missing from your inventory when you obviously own it. Alright, so what can Gyre accomplish? Her one is Arcsphere. It is essentially a trap that you can place in advance. The initial explosion is the smaller radius value here, and it quickly expands to the larger radius. If you hit 3 or more enemies with a smaller radius number on initial impact, then the damage of the periodic pulses are increased. The 2000 electric damage is only for the initial impact. Radius scales with range, duration scales with, well, duration, and damage stats are affected by strength. There are a few things you should know about this ability. You are hard capped to 3 arc spheres, unlike Protea's slash grenades that have no limit. Therefore, you cannot effectively CC and kill an area as a door trap. Now, you'd think it would be balanced if it's capped to 3 spheres. It's not. Even if you have 3 overlapping spheres in one spot, it will not CC enemies consistently enough with electric procs to stop them from shooting you, unlike Wisp's shock modes. Enemies can also walk through this faster than you think despite the occasional electric procs. Yes, it can kill on basic star chart, but if you've been here before, you'll know I only rank Warframes against how they handle Steel Path. I feel it should just scale up damage in general with the numbers of enemies caught, and not just a simple 3 enemies for a single damage scaling bump. Now, there is a way to make this work as you can see here, but how about we look at her 2 first before discussing that further. Her 2, Coil Horizon, is probably one of the best grouping abilities in the game right now, as it's also her Helminth ability. It has a 12 meter base range, which is higher than all other subsume abilities we have available. But it's also much more than that. While it has slightly lower initial damage than your 1, at just 1250, if you force an explosion, instead of the 2000 plus extra damage from more than 3 enemies, what Coil Horizon excels at is its utility, and the option to spam it if you so choose, just like your 1. It naturally has a 2-second fuse before it explodes, but if you press your 2 twice, it will trigger the explosion early and drag enemies in, and unlike your 1, it is guaranteed to proc electric, so at least it has consistent status for gun CO and melee CO. So essentially, your 2 is a lower damage 1 that actually is guaranteed to proc electric per throw, is a hard CC and has even higher suck range than the explosion range of your 1 itself and the highest suck range of any grouping Helminth in the game currently. In other words, your 1 is a shittier version of your 2 in an alternate reality that trades cheaper energy cast for more damage and giving up all its effective CC. So that thing you did with your 1 I showed earlier that can kill, you can also do that with your 2. It's a bit slower, but I'd rather have a different, useful, and unique one than a one that does a slightly better job at DPSing than my 2 when using the same DPS setup rotations. Also, spamming your 2 is a hard CC that will continue to drag in approaching enemies, whereas spamming your 1 on already grouped enemies does not stop enemies from closing in on you and shooting you. Her 3 is an extremely unique ability in Warframe with nothing else like it. Cathode Grace has a 60-second cooldown that is unaffected by any stats. Once you cast it, the cooldown timer immediately begins in the background. The initial ability lasts 8 seconds, and you can increase it by 3 seconds per kill. Both the initial and incremental values are affected by duration, so make sure you get kills with this when you activate it, else it's kinda useless. This also means you cannot completely dump duration. Yes, you can sort of go negative still and work, but I wouldn't recommend it. This ability also passively regenerates 1.5 energy per second, and is affected by strength. Essentially a built-in Octavia passive that's stronger and scales. Zeneric is 5 energy per second, energizes roughly 10 energy per second. As long as you continue to get kills, you should never have to cast this ability again in a mission. The ability has a hard cap of 60 seconds at any moment, but there is no cap to how long you can continue to top this value up. The cap is not affected by any stats and cannot be increased in any way. Finally, this crit chance value. This ability gives the listed flats crit as a buff to all of her abilities when active. To weapons, it gives the listed modded crit as a buff instead. The scaling for weapons is not massive, so treat this more as a nice to have rather than the highlight of her kit for guns. If you bump this high enough, it can have a very noticeable effect on your weaponry, but it isn't as impressive as you may think. We do have a high strength Gyre build to look at later though, so you will get to see for yourself. Her 1 seems to be innately having about 10% crit chance, her 2 seems to be unable to crit normally. These are the bulk of the DPS abilities on her kit if you want to use her to nuke, so her 3 enabling them to crit is a massive buff. This means no matter what Gyre build you use, you probably want at least 200 strength since that is required to give her abilities 100% flat crit out the gate. But her passive also grants you 10% crit chance per electric stack present on the enemy, but only to her abilities. This is important because as you DPS the groups more, your crits will get stronger and scale up. Cathode Grace, her 3, and her passive here can only provide up to a maximum of 300% crit chance to her abilities. These would be guaranteed red crits, but this also means you cannot prime some enemies up with more than 30 electric procs, say with an epitaph, and then chuck her abilities to deal red tier 2, tier 3, or tier 4 crits. But this also means she really wants an AoE primer with viral and electric if you want this to scale infinitely and nuke easily. Her passive and her 3 together are what makes her ability nuke setups actually effective and sustainable. Now, how about her 4? This ability is another layer of CC and some extra bonus damage, but really I find this ability's main purpose is to keep you more easily alive and support the rest of her kit. It's very flashy and looks cool, but in my opinion is unworthy of being an alt. Though her kit is strong enough that I can overlook this because it does complement the blanket CC mentality pretty well while still allowing you to DPS very easily since it's a passive aura akin to Gloom and contributing a little bit of DPS. On the other hand, it isn't channeled, meaning you don't have to worry about active energy drain. The smaller range number is the aura projected around you. Enemies need to be in this range to trigger the first electric quote-unquote trap. Once you get an electrical hit, so read always because all her abilities can crit, every enemy directly hit by her 4 will discharge an electric chain to, it seems, 3 or 4 nearby enemies. The discharge range is this larger value at the bottom. Both values scale with range. This ability works best on group setups with her 2 because you will place a discharge trap on literally all of them at once when you get close, and they will all chain to each other when you land a crit. Basically, her ult is very reliant on her 2 to do any kind of effective DPS, but as a standalone, it is just support CC and chip damage. After going through these abilities, unfortunately, it seems pretty obvious her 1 is the subsume slot in all cases since it's the worst CC on the build out of her 1, 2, and 4 and is a poor man's 2 with slightly higher damage. Also, you want her 2 to shield gate properly, whereas her 1 is unable to because the energy cost is too low and Gyre's base shield value, even with the decay key, is too high. And because her entire kit literally requires her 2 to perform optimally, removing that one is out of the question. You could also remove her 4, but what does her 1 offer that makes it better than your 4? Finally, the last point I want to make is no, none of her kit interactions or buffs will work on Helminth abilities. You cannot make Helminth abilities crit with her 3 or passive. Alright, let's get into builds. We got a couple today. This is an ability nuke build and there's 2 ways to use it. No matter how good the CC is on the frame, we always want another layer of survivability. So for this reason, I'm slotting Rolling Guard and Brief Respite on Gyre. This is also because her DPS requires you to upkeep her 3. And dying makes it really annoying to set it back up due to the short initial timer on it and longer cast times on her 4, etc. As you can see, we have subsumed her 1 off for Roar, because we already want to build strength to field her nukes with her 2 regardless, and the crit chance from her 3. Therefore, Roar is a natural choice because it will double dip on the ability damage dots we create with the procs, while single dipping the initial raw hit. This build has balanced efficiency, and because we have 199 strength, her 3 gives back 3 energy per second while active. This combined with Energize is more than enough to sustain your energy economy for ability spam on her 2. You have the option to run Zenrike for Wellspring if you want, but instead I went the way of Matarite for faster ability spam. Matarite now has a built-in natural talent, and we're going to be stacking this with an actual natural talent on Gyre herself for Natural Talent Prime. It's very noticeable. This is the actual main reason I'm picking Matarite. All the rest is a bonus. You do need the transference once every 20 seconds to refresh power transfer though. And then you might as well also add in a chain to Sling for the Sling strength buff that grants you 40 ability strength for 20 seconds, although it isn't that necessary. But let's get back to the build. Gyre seems to be tuned to not need too much range. Building range is important, but it's one of those frames that can play very comfortably below 200 range and still feel really functional. So I only slotted 175, and as I previously mentioned, we have 3 Augur mods on the build with 2 on your pistol, so combined with Brief Respite, this gives you 270% energy to shield conversion. At 100 efficiency, this will make your 2 regenerate 135 shields, which is just enough to cap it out in a single cast. Duration is somewhat important to upkeep all your abilities so you aren't spamming Roar and your 4 constantly, constantly while using your 2 a lot. And the 199 strength to force crits of your abilities regardless of passive electric stacks is achieved with Transient Fortitude and Umbral Intensify. Primed Flow is here to bank energized procs properly since she only has a 240 energy at base, and being a cast heavy frame is risky to waste parts of an energized proc like that, since it now has a 15-second cooldown. If you didn't think the kit CC was enough, I'm even piling this with the Arcane Eruption for even more CC, but you could also slot Arcane Velocity here if you want your Epitaph Primer to function better. Yes, Epitaph again. This Epitaph functions as both a primer and an auger stat stick. While I did skip over the rifle, I would recommend bringing something for Amalgam Serration for sprint speed, but you won't be using said weapon. Okay, so this Epitaph, it's built viral and electric. Viral to make enemies take more damage from her 2, and electric to build their passive stacks against enemies for even stronger crits. You should be seeing tons of orange crits and the rare red crit if you spam your Epitaph into bald enemies. We have the 2 Augur mods here to stat stick as discussed previously, and then the rest are mods to push the status up to 170%, multi-shot, and of fire rate. Using this as a priming tool spends a lot of ammo, so I brought pistol ammo mutation to help with that. Like I said, I'm taking Matarai on this build for power transfer because of how spammy it is, but it's up to you. Sling Strength is the nice 40% strength bonus here too, but you won't use any other parts of this tree. You can opt for Zeneric instead for Hardened Wellspring if you so desire. But alternatively, like I showed at the beginning of the video, there's a unique interaction you can do with Uneru. The Caustic Strike since the original dev shop reveal has now been buffed to 100% strip, which means combined with Coil Horizon, currently the best grouping Helminth in the game, you have infinite scaling. While the Uneru rotation of Coil Horizon, priming, going Operator, Depressor 2, and strip, and then milling to go back to frame is a bit clunky, you cannot deny how powerful the setup is. But for Gyre, the pet can be whatever you want, as she is pretty self-sufficient on this loadout and does not need a companion. You can always take the Panzer route for passively spreading viral quills, and this would be your typical stock Panzer setup. Martyr for the rare health gate if you for some reason need it, despite brief respite, a rolling guard and massive amounts of CC on her kit, Panzer Devolution for infinite cat lives, and Tech Assault so it can dodge the lethal hits including those triggered by Martyr procs, 60% of the time. Synth set won't do much here since we don't have Equilibrium slotted, nor does Epitaph have a magazine to passively reload, then Radar and Vacuum. Typical and nothing surprising. Now, how about our second build option? We expand a little bit on synergy here today and get into a little bit of theory crafting. Currently, there are bugs related to this loadout and requires patching, so the true potential of her kit will have to wait until then. Here is what this build variant looks like. Overall, it appears roughly similar to the first and still subsumes over the first slot. This is a dummy subsume slot. It does not need to be Breach Surge. It was recommended to me by chat on stream yesterday, and we proved Breach Surge doesn't really bring too much to the table since the enemies are already dying instantly at relevant levels due to the sheer power of the synergistic loadout, but it could help with endurance there if you wanted to. I'll get into the other Helminth options in a bit. This is a gun support Gyre. The first thing I wanted to point out is you may be alarmed by the neutral duration and 45 efficiency. I mentioned earlier that negative duration is bad on Gyre. We only have 100. So why did I do this? Because it seems pretty risky. Well, that's because I wanted to go all in on crit buffs and strength scaling for subsumes while still having decent range for CCing enemies. We actually tested this on stream, and so long as you don't spam your 2, Energize combined with the 5.36 energy per second from your 3 is more than enough to upkeep your abilities infinitely. This build does not cast your 3 until you have energy conversion procced. The reason I chose to use this mod is Cathode Grace Snapshot Strength on cast, and none of your other abilities are as reliant on strength for effective scaling as your 3, and then you can keep the buffed Cathode Grace for the entire rest of the mission. Just the fact that we're above 200 strength alone is enough to maintain blanket CC from crits of your abilities, and Energize in your 3 will generate on average 374 energy across the 22 seconds your 4 will last on this build. This is on top of any other random energy orbs you find that do not proc Energize due to its 15-second cooldown. So despite 45 efficiency, you will never run out. Natural Talents is being stacked with Matarai again so that we can get Natural Talent Prime. You don't need Uneru on this build since, well, our weapons are more than strong enough. The lower duration means you will be casting your 4 again sooner, and this is a very slow ability to cast. But look at how fast it casts now with Matarai's natural talent and the mod itself. This particular build only wants an effective AoE or electric DPS weapon. No matter what you pick, it will shred enemies quickly because of the grouping from a 2 and letting you safely kill enemies due to the group CC. We're combining this with Arcane Acceleration or whatever fire rate Arcane you want. Arcane Acceleration usually is a bit annoying to proc on semi-auto weapons since it only lasts 9 seconds and has a 30% proc rate. But because any crit works, Acceleration perfectly complements Gyre's kit from all of her ability crits constantly triggering it. You essentially have permanent uptime on this Arcane even when you're not shooting. The single Augur mod, even if you don't bring a pistol, is enough, because Brief Respite with all this will make your 2 regenerate 147 shields in a single cast with 45 efficiency. Now, Breach Surge is cool and all, but how about this instead? Pillage. Yeah, Pillage is old school and basic, but let me introduce you to a new Arcane. This gives 300% crit chance while overshields are active, and with the sheer ridiculous amount of CC Gyre has on her kit and spamminess of Pillage as well as her solid energy economy, you will actually have quite a bit of uptime on this Arcane. You can pair this with literally any weapon, but today I will show this with Ambassador, which is a better Alternox, and the OG gas Catchmoon or /viral Catchmoon that's popped up in a few of my videos. And keep in mind, because her 2 is a ragdoll, it really wants hit scan AoE, but Catchmoon is a projectile and gas, or slash, and cannot land consistent headshots while ragdoll. But who cares? This Arcane combined with Cathode Grace and this Catchmoon build will reach 252% crit chance for split orange and red crits. Fun! Merciless and a Deadhead still give a slightly stronger Catchmoon, but hey, pretty red numbers, am I right? Okay, so that Ambassador. It's the same as the one in my Fobbin Ambassador video and some other recent videos I can't remember at the moment. I think it was the Garuda Bloodforge option. But basically this is a 100% status Ambassador that does pure electric damage. Perfect to complement Gyre's kit. With the Madurai boosting energy conversion proc Cathode Grace that lasts the entire mission, Cathode Grace grants 178.5% mod crit chance. This pushes the Ambassador build all the way up to 78.6% crit. And because it's Ragdoll CC with Coil Horizon, you will get a bunch of extra hits and extra electric procs, which will completely annihilate and one-shot enemies since the weapon has 100% status. Primed Fast Stance and Merciless keeps the reload down to 1.4 seconds, which is important because you can only shoot twice before reloading. This slot can be Vile Acceleration. I just had polarity problems, especially because if you don't use Acceleration, you're using Cascadia Overcharge. But yes, this is literally a better Alternox. I'll get into that weapon tomorrow, it's a bit of a shame. One thing I want to point out is Galvanized Aptitude does not work on the AoE, only on the direct hit, but its main purpose here is to also push the status above 100%, and with the ammo usage, you obviously want to bring Vigilante Supplies, which also gives the free Vigi set bonus. Now how about the Catchmoon build? You got a Gas Hemorrhage and a Viral Hemorrhage. Take whichever one you want, both are insanely strong. I've showed these ones quite a few times now, so I think I can just say copy this build, point and shoot. The Viral Hemorrhage build has not changed in all the times I've showed it in the past half a year, and the Gas Hemorrhage build is using Hornet Strike instead of Sharpened Bullets since we're using Cascadia Overcharge instead of Merciless or Deadhead. Gun CO is multiplicative on any non-AoE components of all kit guns. There you go, a deep dive into what Gyre can pull off. She's an incredibly fun frame to play in my eyes, and the blanket CC and ease of use in her kit makes it very comfortable to play whether you're making the nuke builds, gun support builds, or whatever you want. Unfortunately, I will have to detract some points by having her 1 literally being tailor-made to nuke with her 2, but at the same time being barely better than spamming your 2 to start with. Her 3 is amazing, and her 4 is lackluster, but enough to complement the rest of the kit, so I would say she has 2/3 to 3/4 of a full kit. This puts her way above Ureli, and I would say above Caliban too since she doesn't have animations that scream shoot me and kill me, I'm animation locked, and also has actual CC while also supporting her. But still under Sevagoth in my eyes, as I feel he was still the best frame we've received in the past year, with his kit complexity and usability wise. It was a good balance. What did you think? If this is your first time watching, feel free to leave a like or better yet subscribe. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. 79.5% of you are not subscribed. I'm trying my best to get you new information out always as soon as possible, like I've done with covering Garuda's rework and the Angels of Zariman content. Stick around if you want to see interesting memes and builds on a nearly daily basis. Don't miss out on any of that, do you? That'll be it for this video. Thank you all for watching, and see you all next time.